my home office. I had been awake since 5, too restless to sleep. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my son's life. Nathan was getting married. Every flower, every light, every detail of this day had been carefully planned for months. I wanted it to be perfect for him, for our family, for everything Gregory and I had built together over 25 years of marriage. But perfection, I was about to learn, is fragile. As I walked down the hallway toward the kitchen, I heard voices coming from the living room. Gregory's low, familiar tone mixed with a lighter one that made my stomach twist. "Rachel, my son's fiancée." I stopped. The sound of laughter followed, intimate, careless. I leaned slightly forward and saw them through the half-open door. Gregory was standing close to her, his hand brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. She smiled, her eyes soft and warm in a way I had never seen her look at Nathan. My breath caught. Then, without hesitation, Gregory leaned in and kissed her. Not a polite, nervous kiss. A long, tender one that stripped the air from my lungs. For a moment, the world stopped. My heart thudded so loudly I was sure they would hear it. I wanted to scream, to rush in and tear them apart. But before I could move, I felt a presence behind me. I turned. Nathan stood in the hallway, his face pale, his jaw clenched tight. His tuxedo hung loosely from his frame, and the light from the window cast deep shadows under his eyes. He had seen everything, every second. The silence between us was unbearable. He took a slow step toward me, his voice barely a whisper. "Mom," he said, his words trembling but sharp. "I already know." My lips parted, but no sound came out. My hands shook. Nathan's eyes glistened, cold and hollow. "And it's worse than you think." Before I could speak, he turned away, leaving me frozen in the doorway. I looked back through the crack at my husband, and the woman who was supposed to become my daughter-in-law. The sound of their laughter filled the room again, echoing off the walls of a house that had suddenly become a stranger to me. I didn't remember walking back to my office. One moment I was standing in the hallway, staring at the people who had destroyed everything I believed in, and the next I was sitting at my desk, staring blankly at a spreadsheet I could no longer read. The columns of numbers blurred together, meaningless now. My hands rested on the keyboard, trembling slightly. I had spent 25 years of my life building this family, keeping track of bills, birthdays, appointments, making sure everything ran smoothly while Gregory played the charming husband, the admired father. I told myself our differences balanced us out. I was the anchor, he was the wind. I didn't know the wind had been blowing in another direction for so long. Outside, the sun was climbing higher. I could hear the distant sound of delivery trucks pulling up with flowers and decorations for the ceremony in our backyard. I should have been checking on the caterers, organizing the seating charts, smiling for the photographer. Instead, I sat there numb. The door creaked open. Nathan stood there in his pajamas, holding a mug of coffee. His eyes were tired but calm, almost too calm for what he had just witnessed. "Mom," he said softly, "you've been up all night, haven't you?" I forced a smile. "I just want everything to be perfect for my boy." My voice cracked on the last word. He sat on the edge of the desk, studying me for a moment. "Dad left early this morning," he said quietly. "Said he needed to pick up a gift for Rachel's parents." He looked down at his coffee, then back at me. "But we both know that's not true, don't we?" The question hit me like a knife. I didn't answer. I couldn't. He took a deep breath. "Mom, can I ask you something?" I nodded, unable to trust my voice. "Do you think Rachel really loves me?" The words hung in the air. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. How could I tell him what I had just seen? How could I destroy his heart with the truth? "Why would you ask that, Nathan?" I finally managed to whisper. He looked away, his shoulders sinking. "Because lately when she looks at me, it's like she's somewhere else. Like I'm just convenient." He hesitated, his voice barely audible. "And she's been spending a lot of time with Dad. She says he's helping her with investments." I swallowed hard. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Before I could find words, Nathan's eyes lifted to mine again. They were filled with something that chilled me to the bone. "I think she's in love with someone else," he said quietly. The coffee mug trembled in his hand, and in that moment I knew he wasn't guessing. He already knew the truth. By mid-morning, the house was alive with noise. The florist had arrived, the decorators were stringing white lights across the patio, and I moved among them like a ghost. I smiled when spoken to, gave polite directions, even thanked the delivery men. Inside, though, I was unraveling thread by thread. At exactly 10 o'clock, a white sedan pulled into the driveway. Rachel stepped out, her long hair catching the sunlight. She was stunning, graceful, every inch the perfect bride. She walked up the path, clutching her phone, her smile bright and confident. From the kitchen window, I watched her knock on the front door. Gregory opened it, and the moment their eyes met, I felt a wave of nausea roll through me. I told myself I wouldn't look. I told myself I didn't want to see more. But the truth was, I had to know. I slipped out the back door, my heart pounding, and crept through the garden. The hydrangeas I had planted years ago had grown tall, almost shoulder height. From behind them I could see directly into the living room through the large bay window. Gregory poured Rachel a drink. They stood by the fireplace, the same spot where we'd taken every family photo for years. He leaned closer, said something that made her laugh. Her hand brushed his arm. It was small, almost innocent, but I saw the way his shoulders relaxed, the way he looked at her. It was the look of a man in love or lust, and it wasn't for me. My fingers dug into the soil beneath the flowers, the earth cold and damp. 25 years, I thought. 25 years of loyalty, of sacrifice, of pretending everything was fine. For this. Then Rachel reached up, resting her palm on his chest. He bent his head and kissed her deeply without hesitation. I bit down hard on my lip, tasting blood. The world blurred for a second. I wanted to run in there, to scream until the windows shattered. But then I saw movement behind the glass, a reflection. Up the staircase in the shadows stood Nathan. His face was unreadable, frozen. He wasn't just hurt, he was broken. My breath caught. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just my pain anymore, it was his. Suddenly a hand gripped my arm. I turned sharply, my heart racing. Nathan was beside me now, pale but composed. He had slipped out through the side door, silent as a shadow. "Mom," he whispered, his voice low but steady, "don't go in there. Not yet." I could barely speak. "Nathan, they..." "I know," he said, cutting me off. "I've known for weeks." I stared at him, confused. "What do you mean?" He took his phone from his pocket, his hands trembling slightly. "I hired someone. I needed proof." He swiped through photos, and I saw them, Gregory and Rachel at a downtown hotel, walking hand in hand, sitting at an outdoor cafe, her head on his shoulder. The timestamps told the story of betrayal more clearly than words ever could. "This wasn't a mistake," Nathan said quietly. "It's been going on for months." I felt the ground shift beneath me. Everything I thought I knew, my marriage, my family, my life, was collapsing in silence behind the garden wall. I looked at my son, my heart aching. "What are we going to do?" Nathan's jaw tightened, his eyes suddenly cold. "We're going to end it," he said. "But not today. Not like this. We're going to make them regret every lie they ever told." That night the house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock. Gregory had gone to bed early, claiming exhaustion from wedding stress. I sat at my desk, staring at the faint reflection of my face in the dark computer screen. I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. Her eyes were red, her mouth a tight line of disbelief. At 11 p.m. Nathan knocked softly on the door. Behind him stood my sister, Carla Jennings. I hadn't seen her in months. Once a decorated police detective, she had retired early and started her own private investigation agency. When Nathan told me he'd hired a professional, I never imagined it would be her. "Linda," she said, her voice calm and steady, "we need to talk." She placed a folder on my desk, thick and heavy. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were printed photographs, financial records, and neatly organized notes. The first page showed Gregory and Rachel entering the Magnolia Grand Hotel in downtown Savannah. The timestamp read 2:17 p.m. 3 weeks ago on a day, Gregory had told me he was at a business conference. Page after page revealed the truth I had refused to see. Different restaurants, different days. The same deceitful faces. "This wasn't just an affair," Carla said, crossing her arms. "I started digging deeper when Nathan came to me. Gregory's been moving money. A lot of it." I blinked. "Money? From where?" "From you," she replied, her tone sharp. "He's been withdrawing cash from your joint accounts, taking small amounts from different branches so the pattern wouldn't trigger alerts. But that's not all." She opened another folder and slid out a loan agreement. My heart stopped. My signature was on the bottom line, but it wasn't mine. "He forged it," Carla said. He's taken out nearly $70,000 against your retirement fund over the past year. I pressed a hand to my mouth. All those years of careful planning, of saving for our future, it was gone. Carla continued, her voice low. But there's more. 15 years of monthly payments to a woman named Monica Reed. The same amount every month, like clockwork. The name meant nothing to me. Who is she? She used to work with him. Left the company suddenly 15 years ago. Carla hesitated, then pulled out a final document. I ran a DNA test. For a long moment I couldn't breathe. She placed a single sheet of paper in front of me. Near the bottom, bold black letters read, probability of paternity, 99.999%. She has a daughter, Linda, Carla said softly. Her name is Zoe, she's 15, and she's Gregory's child. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the desk, my knuckles white. 15 years. While I was helping Nathan with school projects, while Gregory was promising me forever, he had been living a second life a few towns away. I'm sorry, Carla said gently. I wish I could have brought better news. I stared down at the evidence photos, bank statements, the DNA report, and felt something inside me shift. The pain didn't vanish, but it changed shape. It hardened. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm, almost detached. Then we end this tomorrow. Not just the wedding, the lies, all of it. The next morning I woke before dawn. The sky outside was still dark, streaked with gray clouds that promised rain. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, the folder of evidence open before me. Every photo, every number, every lie had become fuel. I wasn't just a betrayed wife anymore. I was a woman preparing for war. Nathan came downstairs quietly. His tie was in his hand, his eyes tired but focused. We didn't need to speak. Everything had already been decided. Around 6, Carla arrived. She wore jeans, a black jacket, and a calm expression that made her look more like a detective than a sister. She carried a small case. Inside it were the tools for what she called a clean presentation. A hidden projector, remote controls, and a laptop disguised as part of the wedding slideshow equipment. I've connected everything to the main screen by the altar, she said. Once you press this button, it'll play automatically. I nodded. My fingers brushed the small remote. It looked so harmless, yet it held the power to destroy 2 lives. On the counter beside me sat an envelope. Inside were the divorce papers, signed, notarized, ready. My lawyer had prepared them days ago, after I told him what Carla found. I also had a flash drive containing every piece of evidence. The affair photos, the forged loans, the DNA report. No one would ever call me delusional again. You still have time to change your mind, Carla said, searching my face. Once this starts, there's no undoing it. I shook my head. I'm done protecting people who don't deserve it. We went over the plan one last time. The slideshow would appear normal at first: baby photos, family vacations, happy moments. Then, when the officiant reached the traditional line, if anyone here has reason these 2 should not be married, that's when I would stand and press the button. Nathan would back me up. Carla would stay close to handle any confrontation. The police contact she'd arranged would wait nearby with an arrest warrant for Rachel's embezzlement charges. I looked out the kitchen window. The garden was already being prepared for the ceremony. Rows of white chairs. Ribbons tied to the archway. The place where my life had once felt perfect now looked like a stage for truth. I whispered to myself, for 25 years I kept his secrets. Today I bury them with his pride. Carla gave a slow nod. Then let's make sure they never forget this day. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, the garden behind our house had transformed into a scene straight out of a magazine. White roses lined the aisle, soft music played from a string quartet, and the air smelled of rain mixed with perfume. Guests filled the rows of chairs, their conversations light and cheerful. If only they knew. I moved among them, calm on the outside, hollow on the inside. My dress was elegant and simple, pale blue, the color Gregory once said made my eyes look kind. He stood by the bar, shaking hands, charming everyone with that same easy smile. When his gaze met mine, I forced a polite nod. To anyone watching, we were the picture of marital harmony. But my heart beat like a drum beneath my ribs. Nathan looked striking in his dark suit. He greeted his groomsmen, hugged relatives, laughed at the right moments. Only I could see the tension behind his smile, the storm brewing beneath his calm. When our eyes met, he gave me a subtle nod. It was time. The ceremony began. The music softened as the guests rose. Rachel appeared at the end of the aisle, radiant in lace and silk, her father proudly guiding her forward. For a fleeting moment, I almost pitied her. She looked like every young bride stepping into a new life, unaware that hers was about to crumble. Gregory sat beside me in the front row, reaching over to squeeze my hand. His touch made my skin crawl. "You look beautiful, Linda," he whispered. "Isn't this a perfect day?" I smiled faintly. "Perfect," I echoed, my voice flat. The officiant spoke of love, trust, and fidelity, each word slicing through me like glass. I watched Gregory's profile, his lips curving in a faint smile of pride. Rachel's eyes darted toward him once, just long enough for me to see it, that secret connection. They truly believed they had won. Then came the moment. "If anyone here has any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony," the officiant said, smiling at the crowd, "speak now or forever hold your peace." Silence. And then I stood. A collective gasp rippled through the garden. Heads turned. Cameras stopped recording. Gregory's hand shot out, gripping my arm tightly. "Linda," he hissed under his breath, "sit down. Don't you dare." I shook off his hand as though it burned. "I'm sorry," I said loudly, my voice steady. "But there is a reason." A murmur spread through the guests. Rachel froze at the altar, confusion flickering across her face. Her father, Judge Collins, began to rise from his seat, his expression darkening. "Mrs. Porter," he thundered, "what is the meaning of this?" "The meaning," I said, pulling the small remote from my purse, "is that your daughter has been living a lie, and so has my husband." I pressed the button. The large screen behind the altar flickered to life. At first, it showed what everyone expected, a photo of Nathan as a child, smiling in a baseball uniform. Then, the image changed. Gasps filled the air as the next photo appeared: Gregory and Rachel at a hotel, his arm around her, their faces far too close to be innocent. Another photo followed, and another. A series of timestamps scrolled across the corner of each image, all from the past 6 months. Gregory shot to his feet. "This is fake," he shouted. "These are doctored." "Really?" I said calmly. "Then maybe you can explain this." The next slide showed a bank statement, withdrawals 500 here, 700 there, over and over. Then came the forged loan documents, side by side with my real signature. The crowd began to whisper, some covering their mouths, others openly staring at Gregory in disbelief. Rachel's mother gasped as the following image appeared: a close-up of a diamond necklace, followed by a photo of Rachel wearing it at her bachelorette party. "That," I said, "was bought with money stolen from my retirement fund." Rachel turned pale. Her hands trembled. "No," she whispered, "this isn't." But before she could finish, the final slide appeared. A DNA report. At the bottom, in bold letters, probability of paternity, 99.99%. Next to it, a smiling photo of a 15-year-old girl, Zoe Reed. The silence was absolute. And Gregory's face drained of color. Rachel swayed on her feet. I took a step forward, my voice quiet but sharp enough to cut through the air. For 15 years he's had another child with another woman. And for the last year he's been sleeping with my son's fiancée. Rachel let out a strangled sob and collapsed, her bouquet scattering across the grass. Her mother rushed to her side while Judge Collins stood frozen, humiliated. Gregory tried to bolt. He turned toward the aisle, but a figure stepped into his path: Carla, still dressed as catering staff, holding out a badge. "Going somewhere, Gregory?" she asked. He froze, his face twisting in panic. Behind her, 2 police officers approached. "Rachel Collins," one announced, "you're under arrest for embezzlement and wire fraud." The handcuffs clicked shut, the sound echoing through the stunned garden. Nathan walked up beside me, his face pale but steady. He took my hand in his. "It's over, Mom," he said quietly. "Finally over." Around us, the whispers turned into chaos: guests leaving, reporters calling, phones flashing. But all I heard was the sound of the rain beginning to fall, soft and steady, washing over the wreckage of a perfect day that had never been real. The garden that had once looked like a dream now resembled a battlefield. Flowers trampled, chairs overturned, whispers echoing like distant thunder. By the time the police cars drove away, the guests had scattered. Only a few lingered: neighbors, relatives, all pretending not to stare at me as they passed. I stood beneath the arch Gregory had built, the rain soaking into my hair, watching the last patrol car disappear down the road. That night, the house was silent. Nathan stayed with me, cleaning up what was left of the wedding. The once beautiful cake sat untouched in the refrigerator, a monument to everything that had gone wrong. "You should rest, Mom," he said softly. I nodded but didn't move. My body was still, but my mind replayed every moment on a loop: the shock, the faces, the way Rachel screamed when they took her away. The story spread faster than wildfire. By the next morning, every local station had a version of it: lawyer arrested at her own wedding, businessman exposed in double-life scandal. Our family name was everywhere, our photos plastered on screens. I didn't leave the house for 3 days. When I finally did, it was to see my lawyer. I handed him the folder Carla had helped me prepare: financial records, forged documents, the DNA report. He flipped through them silently, then looked up. "Mrs. Porter, you have an airtight case. He'll lose everything he's taken from you." Within weeks, the divorce was filed. Gregory didn't fight it. The evidence was too overwhelming. I was granted full ownership of the house and restitution from what he had stolen. Rachel's charges moved quickly. She pled guilty to embezzlement and received 2 years in a minimum security facility. Her parents, once pillars of Savannah's legal circles, quietly resigned from their positions and left town. Gregory's fall was quieter but no less complete. He lost his job, his friends, his reputation. The man who once thought himself untouchable now lived in a small apartment across the river, a ghost of who he had been. But the strangest consequence came 2 weeks later: a letter, handwritten, sitting in my mailbox. The return address was from Monica Reed. Inside, a single page. "Dear Mrs. Porter, I'm truly sorry for the pain my past with Gregory has caused you. My daughter Zoe saw the news. She knows everything now and she'd like to meet you and her brother. If you're open to it, please let me know. We'll understand if you're not ready." I sat at my kitchen table, reading the letter over and over, the words blurring through my tears. Zoe, the child of his betrayal, the girl who had done nothing wrong. I folded the letter carefully and set it aside. For the first time since that terrible day, I wasn't sure what came next. A week later, Nathan found me in the kitchen, staring at the letter again. He poured himself coffee and sat across from me, his voice gentle. "You've read that thing 100 times, Mom? What are you thinking?" I looked up at him, uncertain. I don't know if I can face her, Nathan. Every time I see that name, I remember what he did. How could I sit across from his daughter and not feel angry? Nathan leaned forward. "She's not the one who hurt us. She didn't choose any of this." He paused, his tone soft but firm. "She's my sister, Mom. She deserves a chance to know the truth and to know us." He was right. I had spent weeks buried in bitterness, convincing myself I was healing when really I was just hiding. Meeting Zoe wouldn't erase the past, but maybe it could stop it from defining our future. We met at a small cafe halfway between Savannah and the town where Monica lived. My hands shook the entire drive. When I walked in, Monica stood and gave me a small, nervous smile. Time had been kinder to her than I expected. She looked tired, but not cruel. And then I saw Zoe. She was young, bright-eyed, holding a worn paperback in her hands. When our eyes met, I froze. She had Gregory's eyes, the same dark, thoughtful gaze that once made me fall in love with him. For a moment, the air felt too thin to breathe. "Mrs. Porter," Monica said quietly, "thank you for agreeing to meet." I nodded, unable to speak. Nathan broke the silence first. "Hi, Zoe, I'm Nathan." His smile was soft, genuine. She smiled back shyly. "Hi, I've seen your pictures online," she said, blushing a little. "You look just like my mom said you would." We sat for nearly an hour. It was awkward at first, full of long pauses and forced smiles. But slowly the tension began to melt. Nathan asked about her school, her favorite books, her plans for college. I listened, and somewhere in the middle of that simple conversation, I stopped seeing her as a reminder of betrayal. I saw her as a child who deserved better than the lies we'd all lived under. When it was time to leave, Zoe stood and hugged me without hesitation. "I'm glad you came," she whispered. "Maybe we can try again sometime." I held her tighter than I expected. "We will," I said, and for the first time in a long while, I truly meant it. 1 year later, the house that had once felt like a museum of memories was gone. I sold it and bought a small townhouse on a quiet street near the water. The mornings were peaceful now. No more whispers behind closed doors, no more pretending. Just sunlight, the sound of waves, and a kind of silence that finally felt safe. Nathan came by often, usually bringing takeout and stories about his new job in landscape design. He said creating gardens helped him heal, turning chaos into something beautiful. Watching him laugh again, seeing the light return to his eyes, was worth more than any revenge could ever give me. Zoe visited on Sundays. She'd sit at my kitchen counter doing homework while I cooked. Sometimes she'd call me Ms. Porter, and sometimes, when she forgot, she called me Mom. Every time she slipped, my heart ached, but not from pain, from something closer to peace. Gregory showed up one evening, months after the divorce was finalized. He looked older, smaller somehow, the weight of his own choices written across his face. He said he was in therapy, that he finally understood the damage he'd caused. He asked for forgiveness. I gave it, not for him but for me. Holding on to hatred had kept me trapped in the same cage he built. Letting go was the only way out. I forgive you, I told him, but I'll never forget. He nodded, tears in his eyes, and walked away without another word. As the sun set that night, I stood on my porch, watching the light fade over the water. The family I thought I had was gone, but what Nathan, Zoe, and I built in its place was smaller, quieter, and real. For the first time in decades, I wasn't surviving someone else's version of love. I was living my own truth. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from.